in case you didn't know, an election is coming up. There's a lot of important issues like the border, the economy, women's rights, foreign policy. But if you could spare a moment of your time, let's look at those issues through the lens of climate change. I'm not telling you who to vote for, although it'll be obvious who I'm advocating for. But I want to highlight the climate crisis because it impacts everybody and we need to come together to solve it. We only have 6 years to avoid unstoppable, inevitable ecosystems collapse due to climate tipping points that we're rapidly approaching. If we breach them, no amount of electric vehicles or solar and wind farms will stop us from reaching catastrophic levels of warming. So this election is consequential for generations to come. So let's first look at the border crisis. By 2050, there will be an estimated 140 million climate refugees or environmental migrants. For context, 1 million Syrian refugees caused Brexit. By 2100, there will be 13 million Americans displaced and an estimated 1 billion climate refugees globally. And also an insane amount of human trafficking. That sounds like an exaggeration, but most of our populated cities are along coastlines that will eventually be inundated by sea level rise. There will be crop failures and droughts leading to famines, wars over resources like water, destruction from megastorms, and all of these factors will contribute to the collapse of fragile parts of global economies. We're at a fork in the road with immigration, and the darker path starts with electing a man with this type of rhetoric and fear-mongering about immigrants.
I don't know if you call them people. In some cases, they're not people, in my opinion, but these are bad. These are animals, okay? But we're taking people out of the country. You wouldn't believe how bad these people are. These aren't people. These are animals. The Democrats say, please don't call them animals. They're humans. I said, no, they're not humans. They're not humans. They're animals. Nobody has any idea where these people are coming from. And we know they come from prisons. We know they come from mental institutions, insane asylums. We know they're terrorists. Nobody has ever seen anything like we're witnessing right now. It is a very sad thing for our country. It's poisoning the blood of our country. Our country is being poisoned. Look, we have, and we can be nice about it. We can talk about, oh, I want to be politically correct. But we have people coming in from prisons and jails, long-term murderers.
And you remember when they say, no, these are migrants, and these migrants, they don't commit crimes like us. No, they make our criminals look like babies. These are stone cold killers. They'll walk into your kitchen, they'll cut your throat. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
So we have two futures ahead of us. One, we'll have millions of bodies piled up at border walls because of anti-immigrant and nationalistic sentiment. Another future uses immigration as a way to boost the economy by drastically changing immigration policies now and also helping countries in the South become more resilient to the impacts of climate change so they don't need to leave their homes in the first place. Okay, let's go on to the economy and inflation. Climate change has cost $750 billion in the last 5 years, and it'll cost $38 trillion a year by 2050.
AccuWeather is now estimating damages up to $160 billion. And just to put that in perspective, if it did reach that figure, that would be in the top 5 or 6 costliest disasters ever on our planet, according to the statistics. And, you know, that's about a fourth or a fifth of the U.S. military budget each year.
For every $1 spent on mitigation and adaptation, we save $4 in disaster response. Of course, it's going to cost a lot of money, but it's investment spending, and it'll be far more expensive to do nothing about climate change. Fossil fuel companies would be insolvent if they had to pay for what they've done and what's going to happen as extreme weather events get worse and more common. When the externalities of the fossil fuel industry are more than their profit, this is a market failure. Economic systems will collapse alongside ecosystems because it will not be sustainable due to continuous market failures. We need an economic mobilization akin to FDR's New Deal that helps build an economy that doesn't continue to spew CO2 and methane emissions. By doing job-creating projects like updating our collapsing electrical grid, drastically improving public transportation systems, infrastructure updates that protect us from new extreme weather, and other adaptation and mitigation efforts like immigration policy reform. If government corruption is one of your main issues, we can't solve the climate crisis without addressing corruption and getting money out of elections. Now, only if we had some type of actionable outline for a plan like this. Unregulated economic systems will not steer us away from climate catastrophe. Free markets are steering us directly towards it. We cannot have an economic system that relies on exponential growth in a world of finite resources. That is incompatible. So if our economic system is incompatible with a living planet, we need to change that system, not invest further in it. Inflation is multifactorial, but a major cause is supply chain disruptions. We will have more supply chain disruptions from heat waves, droughts, famines, wars over resources, and megastorms that wipe out cities. Many industries will need to become nationalized, like insurance and healthcare industries, because they are necessary and they will never be able to make a profit as the climate crisis worsens. Foreign policy is an issue that I am passionate about. From a climate perspective, dropping bombs emits a lot of CO2. From a human perspective, this genocide is getting far too close to World War III. We need an arms embargo on Israel for their extensive war crimes. Back to the lens of climate change, there will be no wars over oil if we have regenerative energy. Crime is another election issue, but wealth and income inequality are strongly correlated with crime rates. And the climate crisis is going to expand that gap between the haves and the have-nots drastically. You know what else is correlated with crime rates? Heat. And hotter days will obviously be more common with global warming. Now, before I directly discuss the issue of climate change, let's recap those other issues. If your main issue was the border, we need to address climate change to minimize the amounts of worldwide climate refugees that will throw politically unstable countries into chaos and cause nationalistic countries to commit genocide. If your main issues are inflation, the economy, crime, or war, you should heavily consider the candidate who's more likely to address climate change when voting. If your main concerns were women's rights, healthcare, education, or freedom of speech, you're likely voting for the candidate that will be more persuasive to take drastic action in fighting climate change. We've known about climate change for 50 years, and we've kicked the can so far down the road that we've run out of road. We need to take drastic action now. More incrementalization will doom us. This used to not be a bipartisan issue, and it needs to return to that.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
We need cleaner forms of energy, and we need them fast.
We need to come together to work on this because the climate crisis is here. So I said earlier that we only have 6 years. We only have to the end of this decade to avoid major climate catastrophe. Feedback loops that are already engaged are pushing us towards tipping points that will make warming non-linear and unstoppable. We've already breached the tipping point of the West Antarctic ice sheet, meaning we can't save it. It's inevitably collapsing, which will lead to 30 feet of sea level rise over time. That tipping point has already been crossed, and there's nothing we can do about that. We need to drastically change our energy systems before we reach other tipping points.
The impacts of climate change show us how interconnected the world is, and we can start our own feedback loops of collective action to catalyze a mass movement that transitions our economy from valuing exponential profit to one that values sustainability and our health of our environments and our peoples. Thankfully, we know how to bring people together, how to defeat in-group versus out-group bias. It's by facing a mutual problem together, and there's no bigger existential threat that impacts more people than climate change. What we do right now might stop us from reaching crucial tipping points that doom future generations for centuries to come, making us, right now, the most powerful humans to ever live. We need to take that responsibility seriously. We need to do something about the climate.
So vote for whoever you're going to vote for. I'm assuming this video didn't really change anybody's mind, but hopefully it can give people talking points to use with their relatives and friends. So hopefully more people will understand how extensive the issue of climate change is and how impactful this election can be on generations to come, because we only have a little bit more time to change course.